In Lecture 2, I'll explore definitions of English medium instruction and examine some key terminology. As noted in the introductory lecture, the internationalisation of higher education takes many forms. Universities around the world strive to internationalise their curricula and establish international partnerships, amongst other things. In non-native English-speaking contexts, the internationalisation of higher education has led to an increased transition towards EMI. What then is EMI? Many different terms have been used to describe the transition from teaching English as a subject to teaching in English. EMI is a term widely used, particularly at the moment with its growing popularity, but it is quite difficult to define. Dearden defines EMI as the use of the English language to teach academic subjects in countries or jurisdictions where the first language, the L1, of the majority of the population is not English. In essence, EMI is the use of English to teach academic subjects such as science, maths, or economics in countries where the majority of the population are speakers of another language. Of course, this definition is not uncontroversial. Many educational contexts, of course, are multilingual, and therefore it's difficult to define what the majority language is in a truly international university. Nevertheless, the main defining criteria, and the one most commonly accepted, is that EMI occurs in national contexts where English is not the predominant language of communication outside of the classroom. By this definition then, EMI programmes could be considered to operate in Thailand, but not in Singapore, and in Germany, but not in Ireland. They could also arguably operate in Hong Kong and Malaysia, which, despite a historical tie to the United Kingdom, exist in a predominantly non-English using society. However, EMI is approached in a variety of ways, and as such, a number of alternative terms are important to examine before we proceed in this module. Just to recap then, EMI refers to courses, programmes where language learning is not an explicitly stated aim. And as you can see here on the screen, there's many different terms. EMI is content-focused learning and teaching conducted in English in countries where English is predominantly a so-called foreign language, although as we saw from the introductory language, it's questionable how far they can be considered foreign language contexts today. This definition of EMI fits the one provided by the Japanese Ministry of Education, who state that EMI refers to courses conducted entirely in English, excluding those whose primary aim is language instruction. So just to be clear then, EMI courses do not have an explicit language learning outcome. Courses or programmes that do have an explicit language learning outcome can be defined as content-based courses, CBI, content-based instruction, which involves lessons in an English class or programme being organised around content. This is taken a step further with CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning. CLIL focuses on the use of English for the teaching of other school subjects or specific content. It has a dual focus. A useful definition of CLIL is offered by Do Coyle et al., who state that CLIL is a dual-focused educational approach in which an additional language, second, foreign, or minority language, is used for the learning and teaching of content and language. A lot of research on CLIL has been conducted in secondary school contexts. In university contexts, integrating content and language in higher education, ICLHE, is commonly used. However, it's not always this simple, as many programmes only offer a few credit-bearing courses on an ad hoc basis, and others offer EMI in a more systematic manner, offering full degree programmes. 4-year degree programmes in English are often referred to as ETPs, English Top Programmes. Some universities also have a full campus approach where everything is taught entirely in English. In some, but not all programs, EMI or CLIL classes also operate alongside EAP, English for Academic Purposes, and ESP, English for Specific Purposes classes. Some of these classes are often tailored to the student's major, using subject-specific material, particularly in universities when collaboration is possible between such teachers and content faculty. But in others, these classes are often more general, offered to students around the university of varied disciplines across campus. EAP and ESP emerged in the field of English language teaching as a result of an increased focus on learners' needs. In the early days of English language teaching, it was assumed that learners everywhere had the same needs. We had these long lists of grammar and vocabulary items for students to memorise. The focus at this time was on general English. Learners everywhere had the same needs and would learn English in the same way. As societal and learner needs became more important in the field, we began to see a focus on needs analysis and designing courses focused on learners' needs. Once learners' needs were identified, learning targets could then be identified and set. In Europe, this movement led to the establishment of the Common European Framework of Reference, the CEFR. The emergence of ESP in the field of ELT was also related to post-Second World War needs, with globalisation, ideologies of progress, and the desire to facilitate international communication. The focus on making courses relevant to learners' needs led to an emergence then of ESP, which in a sense led the field back to a process of selection and grading. For example, selecting appropriate vocabulary for legal English, for medical English, for business English. ESP then emphasises specific language knowledge and skills needed for particular situations, and as such, it fits very well with EMI. As Starfield notes, the ESP learner is not learning the language for general educative purposes or for the study of literature in which the language is the subject matter of the course, but rather as a means to the acquisition of some quite different body of knowledge or set of skills. Met's continuum of content and language integration is useful here to distinguish between those programs that focus more on content, like EMI, for example, and those that focus more on language classes with content-based themes. So on this continuum, we would place EMI on the far left and English language teaching on the far right, with CLIL and CBI placed somewhere near the middle. Terminology, as always though, can cause confusion. As Massler et al. Point out, they differentiate between CLIL and subject lessons and CLIL and language lessons. In the former, the focus is on the content, whereas the latter focuses on teaching the language around content themes. CENOs also note that CBI, content-based instruction, and CLIL programs often share similar characteristics. They can be used synonymously. So here it's assumed that the terms can be used synonymously, with CLIL being preferred in Europe and CBI in the USA and Canada. With regards to EMI, while a language development objective is not openly declared in definitions of EMI, making it distinct from other forms of content-related teaching models, such as CLIL approaches, bilingual education models, and CBI. Nevertheless, universities often make reference to the language learning benefits of EMI, which does indicate an expectation that English language proficiency will develop in tandem with subject discipline knowledge. As Hamid et al. Note, some institutions purport that EMI is a relatively simple and cheap solution to both the problems of internationalization and upgraded local language proficiency. So that concludes Lecture 2 on definitions of EMI. In Lecture 3, we'll look at where EMI is conducted around the globe.